everyone. Welcome. So I came here 2 years ago and I spoke about my edible tabletop games. That's games you have to eat to play. And 2 years ago I had 6 games. I now have 13 games. So the key thing about all of them is you have to eat to play. And it's not meant to be a gimmick, it's meant to be a core part of the gameplay. So I've put these 13 games into a cookbook that I successfully kickstarted last year. Yay! Still time to back. But we're here to talk about experimental gameplay, right? And in fact, for me, that is experimental food gameplay. So since food and eating is such a key part of my games, I've had to play with the food itself. And playing with the food changes the gameplay of the game. It makes it more difficult sometimes. It can be different. So these are some of my sort of experiments, and I'm going to try to talk about what kind of has gone right and what has gone wrong. So first up, I want to talk about this game called High Tea Assassin. In High Tea Assassin, it's a social deduction game for 3 players. You get assigned your role by eating an item, and then you have to work out who you can trust. Now, the thing is that people didn't actually trust their taste buds enough and couldn't trust their flavor. So I had to add color in as well. So there's color and flavor to work out what your role is. All right, next up I'm going to talk about a game, Gingerbread Friends. In Gingerbread Friends, you ask a group a set of tough questions, and then you have to guess how they'll respond, what the majority will say. If you're right, you get to pull over a lid, and underneath there might be a prize. So let's go to a demo. All right, so underneath might be a prize. Here we go. So I don't know if you can show that there's a little prize in here. So I'm like, yay, I got a prize, woohoo. Whatever. Or I might get information about where there is a prize. For example, here, there's a little piece of paper that says 1. Now you'll notice I've just pulled off 2 lids and I haven't eaten these. I don't actually need to eat these to play this game. So I'm like, well, that's no good. I'm going to have to change that. So I added frosting to the bottom. So I'm going to now, I'm going to lick it. This actually has turned out all right. You can kind of read it well, not on that thing, but you can kind of see what it says. To me, it kind of kept getting very smudged when I was practicing a lot. So I'm like, that's no good. So tried another option, this one, again, frosting. Underneath here, it's a bit difficult to see, but is royal icing, because royal icing sets harder than frosting. So I'm playing with those properties. All right, back over here then. This is how it looks in the game. There's like a set of symbols and stuff that you use, and there's the key. All right, next game. Next game is called Treasure Cake. Treasure Cake is meant as a kid's birthday party game, where you use a bubble tea straw to put it into the cake and try to find secret stashes of things. The constraints of what this secret stash might be is that it probably had to sit in a cake for maybe overnight, and I wanted it to be obvious to like all of the players that they had discovered something. I didn't want kids to lie, and I wanted it to be a fun, oh my, I found a thing. All right, so, demo. Uh-oh. So, first option, so this is going to come up. Which is like Pop Rocks. So I've got a bunch of Pop Rocks in my mouth. Seems like a good idea. But the problem is you have to store it in cream, probably, in the cake. You can't just store a bunch of Pop Rocks by itself. I'm still popping, so I won't be able to show you that if I eat this, you end up, it won't pop anymore. So that's no good. So I came up with another solution, which is this one. So I turned my tongue bright blue and potentially the rest of my face. And that's what I ended up using in the game. It's recommending that you use blue food dye. All right, next game is a game called Flip and Stick. It's about, there's like a bunch of cookies with peanut butter on them, and you've got to throw items at them and see what sticks. So part of it is like you then flip it upside down and see if all of the items stay on board. So the key thing in this game is the glue, what you're putting on top to see how that works. So back again to the demo station. Here we go. So I've got a few options here. I've got some frosting over here. I'm not very good at throwing, so we'll see. And that kind of worked. And I've got some dip over here and some hummus over here and some peanut butter over here. So you can kind of see they all sort of stick a bit. I mean, if I was further away, stuff might bounce a bit more. It's going over to other spots. But the key thing now is like what happens when I flip them upside down. So the hummus works well. That's great. Frosting here doesn't work. That's a fail. Peanut butter, I mean, I had that in the picture, so you've got to assume this is going to work. Did. And then like dip over here. That's super goopy. Oh, but it actually works. There we go. It's always a mystery sometimes with the experiments. Okay, next up is a game called Cookie Cruncher. In Cookie Cruncher, there are a bunch of different cookies, and obviously, because it's called Cookie Cruncher, and you've got to put them strategically on a board to get points. Now, the catch is that you can bite these cookies to try to make them fit better. So, what sort of cookies am I going to use? Let's go over here to the demo station. So I am going to start, I've put like I'm going to start with an uniced cookie, and you may not be able to see it, but I've put a little line here on this cookie to show where I'm attempting to bite it. So let's try this. That worked pretty well. I was able to get it to the point that I wanted it to for what I aimed for. All right, now I'm going to try one with icing on it. Let's see what happens with the icing on it. Uh-oh, I've lost a part that has a point on it. So now I'm losing points because the icing cracks and that goes all the way through it. Now I have some other ones here. I don't know if you can hear this on the mic, but they're shaking. That's kind of weird. All right, let's try this one. What's happened now is I've got little, a whole lot of sprinkles inside it. And so if you play with this game, you've got to be careful not to get to the center with the sprinkles in it, because they'll all fall out. So this is kind of how it looks in the book, How to Make the Three-Dimensional Cookies. And I also have a version called Toast Cruncher, which is with like ham and eggs instead. Our final game, yay, I'm making good progress, is a game called Flavor Roulette. In Flavor Roulette, there's a bunch of items that all taste the same, but one of them doesn't taste like the other. And you need to keep a poker face while eating these. Now, coming up with the recipes for this is very difficult. You want something that's slightly gross so that it's hard to keep a straight face, but not so gross that you have to spit it out, because that's not really fair. Spice is very difficult to deal with because like people have very radically different reactions to spice. Like I can't really deal with much more than a mild spice, whereas other people are like, oh yeah. So I am now going to torture myself up on stage. The ratio here is more than one of these being bad. And I am going to try to eat it, and then you're going to hopefully try to guess whether I got a good one or a bad one. Okay. I think we've probably got time for a show of hands. Do we have, who thinks that was a good one? Okay. And who thinks that was a bad one? Okay, yeah, it was bad. I've got, that was like a bunch of like powdered cinnamon and like my throat is like, my mouth is so dry and I'm like, I gotta get some water. So like if you know, like if I was standing up here for longer, you would notice I would be grabbing water very suspiciously and going, ugh. Okay, so that's all the demos I have, I'm talking to you about today. I've got 13 different games. They're all really different. There's still so much more that can be done with food, so I hope other people experiment with food as well. And yeah, hopefully you'll get my book. I'm about to hit order on those books soon. So thank you.
So I'm going to take a minute here and just make a comment that when I first met Jen, she was working on, I think was it a mobile title that you're working on?
Probably.
Yeah, she was working on a mobile title. And I remember having a conversation with Jen where she was like, well, I'm working on this game. I'm working on it for a long time. It's not really going where I want. And I was just, I don't know, I'm kind of running out of money and I don't know what I should do. I said, just don't finish it. She's like, well, but I'm working on it for a long time. I just should really finish it. I was like, you should do what you love, right? You don't have to put all of your time and energy into something. And she's up here eating cookies and licking icing off of game pieces. Like, you fucking did it. Like, congratulations. It's amazing. And there was literally no such thing as edible games when I first met you. And now you've started a whole category. So congratulations, John, you're an influencer now. Okay, so next up we actually have a video. So this is Mohammed's game. It is amazing. I'm not going to say much more about it. I'm going to let him talk about it. He really apologized that he could not be here, but he sends wishes from Montreal.
Hi everyone, my name is Mo. This is Jack. I'm a creative director at Artifact 5, a small indie studio in Montreal, Canada. A few months ago, I saw this music video called Lucky You by Eminem and Joyner Lucas, where they're followed by these characters that copy their every move. So I thought it'd be a cool idea to start a project inspired by that called Lucky Me. So Lucky Me is a puzzle shooter where talentless hacks copy your every move, but sometimes you have to use their stupidity against them to survive. The rules are pretty simple. You play as a character in yellow on the left here, and the characters on the right with the red eyes just copy you, and you gotta be the last one standing. You can do the basics. You can aim and move and shoot. And of course all the transitions are dabs. Of course it's not always that easy. Sometimes shooting one guy will get you shot by the other, so you gotta use their lack of original thought to get them to shoot each other. Part of the challenge is to figure out the order of operations. Sometimes shooting the wrong guy first might get you killed. So sometimes it's worth taking the time to line up the perfect shot so you can win in very spectacular ways. So these little blobs at your feet are the ammo you have in your gun, and sometimes you need to pick up additional ammo to finish the job. The main challenge is not just watching where you go and what you do, you also have to keep track of your movements. For example, here we're both out of ammo, but he has a bunch on his side that I have to make sure he avoids. Oh crap, luckily he can't think for himself, so I can waste his bullet and pick up mine from over there. Another strategy is to use the environment to place yourself in a better position where you can pick up the ammo. And there are a whole bunch of environmental hazards that can be very dangerous or super fun. And of course, it wouldn't be a puzzle game without some spikes. And they can just walk straight into it.
So this puzzle uses all the mechanics we just saw. We're both out of ammo. He has bullets on his side, but he has to get there without me running into the spikes in the back, so I have to use the environment to block myself while picking up the bullets. So Eminem has a warm spot in my heart. I've been a huge fan of him since I was a kid growing up in Saudi Arabia, where his music is banned. I would have to go into underground markets to pick up his cassettes, often while running away from the religious police. Actually, one time I got caught and arrested, but that's a story for another time. Oops. And of course, it wouldn't be a real Eminem game without a real Slim Shady mode. In this mode, you play as the real Slim Shady who's standing up, but with every shot, a new Slim Shady would stand up and you gotta figure out who you are every round and be the last one standing. There you go, I'm the last Slim Shady standing. It would be so cool if Eminem got to see this game. It's my fan gift to him. So if you can tweet at him, hold a sign at his concert, yell at him on the street, it would be a dream come true. Also, if you're a publisher who's interested, drop me a line at the website. Thank you so much.
Is it John Woo and Steph over there? Okay. So one of the things I wanted to point out about this video in particular is that, and I can sense it, right? There's this question of like cultural appropriation that we always have in the games industry. This is a different approach. You know, thinking about what you make and how you make it and how it inspires you, and that not all the things you see are going to be exactly what you expect. So next up, we have Jongwoo and Steph. They're going to be talking about what? Oh, sorry, and Alex. Introduced the wrong person. Talking about Lucifer Within Us. Sorry. That's okay.
In the meantime. Hi, my name is Jongwoo. This is Alex. We are from Kitfox Games based out of Montreal, and we are here to show you Lucifer Within Us, which is an experimental mystery-solving game. This is a project that is currently unannounced and still very much in the middle of development, so please try to keep it confidential. I don't know how I don't know how we're gonna keep a secret between 1,000 people in a room, but we're gonna try. Yeah, sure. Technical difficulties. Always happens. Always happens. So Lucifer Within Us is a unique kind of mystery-solving game because it's not about just solving mysteries in the traditional sense. The protagonist is a digital exorcist in a futuristic theocracy. So that gives us a couple tools that normal characters would not have access to. So first, we're going to begin by investigating the body of the victim in this case that happens in a graveyard. We can see from the profile of the character that the victim was an art student, basically, and that the body has a throat slit, which is the most likely cause of death. So this is where it gets interesting. We are going to listen to the testimonies of 3 different characters that were present during the events of the crime. I would ask you to try and see if you can see any discrepancies between what the 3 characters are saying. So this first character was the victim's master, Lucius, and he claims that he arrived at the graveyard for a stroll, and he basically was strolling for most of the afternoon. He sent his apprentice off, the victim off on an errand, but he doesn't really specify what that is. And what's really interesting about the game right now is that you're able to fully control which section of the testimony you see, and it plays out in real time in front of you. Now, this is not reality. This is a subjective reconstruction of what the character is saying. So the cone of vision illustrates what section of the screen that the character actually saw, but even that might not be accurate. It's going to be full of inaccuracies, omissions, and outright lies even. Anyway, so we're gonna skip ahead to the late afternoon, and he claims that someone was passing by, and then he strolled into the back fields, at which point he found the body of his apprentice in a freshly dug grave. Then he called for help, at which point he met the other two suspects of the case, which is Abraham, the grave tender, and Nerissa, the embalmer. So next we're going to talk to Abraham to see what he has to say about the situation. So Abraham claims that he was tending to the bushes outside the mortuary for much of the early afternoon, from 2 o'clock to about 3 o'clock or so. And then he headed inside the mortuary to tell Nerissa, the embalmer, that he was done with attending, and Nerissa dismissed him. Afterwards, he headed through the mortuary to the front yard of the graveyard and tended to polish the headstone that is very prominent there. And finally, in the late afternoon, he heard a cry from the back field and rushed over there to meet Lucius and the other suspect, Nerissa, the embalmer. So there's a couple things suspicious here. Like, he's the gravedigger, but he claims to have never seen the victim or never have dug that particular grave. But we're going to move on to the final testimony, Nerissa, the embalmer. Nerissa claims that she and Abraham spoke in the early afternoon about the funeral and asked him to dig a grave. And then for most of the early afternoon, she was preparing the body for the funeral until Abraham came back to say that he had finished digging the grave. And then finally, she went back to preparing the body until the end of the day, when she heard a cry from the graveyard, and then she rushed over there to find the other two suspects. So it's really strange in that, like, none of the three suspects have really seen where the victim was after basically 2 o'clock or so. But if you've been watching this carefully, you'll probably notice that there are pretty clear discrepancies. So we're going to go back to Abraham and point out something that we just learned. Nerissa claims that they spoke at 2 o'clock about digging a grave, but Abraham insists that he was tending to the bushes. So we're going to contradict him and unmask his lies. At which point the testimony is modified to address the contradiction we pointed out. So now he admits that, in fact, he did speak to Nerissa in the mortuary, and then he took the shovel and went to the back field to dig a grave. All the same, he still insists that nobody came through the backyard. He was alone the entire time. And beyond that, his testimony remains exactly the same as it originally was. He claims that he talked to Nerissa, went through the front, and left. So we are going to have to find more information. So at this point, we're going to go back and do things the traditional way. So we are going to investigate the crime scene. So we are going to head into the mortuary and see if there's anything we can find. And on Nerissa's table, you can find that there's a bouquet of flowers. And the stems of the bouquet have fingerprints on them of the victim, which contradicts what Nerissa said about being alone in the mortuary the entire time. The victim must have passed through at some point. So we're going to go back to Nerissa and point this out to her. And now she admits that, fine, in fact, the victim did come through. And you can see that indicated by the new marker on the timeline. So in the next section, she will show that, in fact, she did greet Isaac, the art apprentice, and then showed him the bouquet of flowers that he wanted to bring to his instructor, Lucius. But she claims that, in fact, Isaac did not take the bouquet and left by the back exit. Now, if Nerissa is telling the truth, and if we take her words at face value, there's a clear contradiction between what Nerissa claims that the victim left at the back exit and what Abraham says, which is that nobody came through the back exit. So Normally, we'd be stuck in this situation, but we have one more power available to us as digital exorcists. We are going to enter Nerissa's mind. This is Nerissa's sanctum, which is a virtual representation of her psyche. The main area is always available to the player, but as you contradict a given suspect, their resolve weakens, and we can discover more secrets about their past, their memories, and their possible motives. In this case, we find this worn bed, which reveals to us that Nerissa had an impoverished upbringing, and perhaps greed was a motivation for the killing, or perhaps not. On the table in the main area, we can also discover the funeral schedule that Nerissa remembers from earlier in the day, which reveals that Lucius, the victim's master, was the one who organized the funeral in the first place. So maybe the whole thing was something that was orchestrated by Lucius. But that's a quick look at Lucifer Within Us' subjective testimonies and investigation system. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I'm a big fan of story games, and I love it when people do investigative work on narrative systems, and I thought that demo was really badass. So next up, we have a video, and this video is Misshapen. Yep. And we're going to show it to you now.
What was that? Oh, okay. So, what is Misshapen? Well, have you played Portal? This is kind of similar, but instead of having the power to make portals with your portal gun, players will be able to provoke unrelented, uncontrolled cellular growth. Misshapen is an obscure physics-based horror first-person shooter where you can't kill your enemies. Of course not, because we are against all that kind of violence. Instead, you can reduce their mobility, distorting their bodies and creating creepy living structures with them. Players may use these distortions to make traps, for example, or build complicated living contraptions, and use these structures to reach places that they are not accessible in any other way. All of this will result in surprising scenarios and interesting emerging gameplay to tinker with. The game is like, let's say, a macabre Metroidvania. This creepy shooter, or is it a nightmarish builder? Okay, whatever. This game is currently under development by Nikos Araitaris, Nicolás Arcabarren, and Fernando Martínez Ruppel, an independent team from Argentina.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I don't think we've ever seen an uncontrolled cellular building game at the Experimental Gameplay Workshop. I think that's that's a first. I think it's maybe another new genre discovered by this workshop. And so Liko is here to present Carto, which I think I saw the first time at Tokyo Game Show this past year. I was walking around looking at the games in this sort of student and independent games showcase, and I saw this game and I was so charmed by it that I asked if he would be interested in submitting, and he did. So one of the other things that I can tell you about Experimental Gameplay Workshop is that it is a family affair, and that when you're somewhere traveling, doesn't really matter where you are, if there's games around, if there's a school that you visit, and there are some things that you think are interesting, you can always just say, hey, you should submit your game to EGW. And with that, I will probably keep talking because we're going? Okay, great. Here's Liko with Carto.
Hello. Hello, it's such an honor to be here. My name is Liko Chen, a co-founder and game designer at Shanghai Games, a small indie game studio in Taiwan. And here is our game, Carto. At first, it looked like a normal adventure game that you control a character and explore lands, and you found a thing, a map, and you can switch to a map view, and you can move or rotate any tile on the map. And when the two tiles have the same type of border, you can connect them together. And when the map changes, the world changes as well. And here's a new map piece. And you can connect into the to the existing map to expand the map. And you'll meet some people, and you can hear their stories. But it's gonna take a while, so let me skip some conversations and speed around a little bit. Is the music out? Anyway, I'll keep playing. So sometimes you will meet people who needs help, like this one. So his house is east of the one on the grassland along the sea. And in order to find his house, you need to move this tile to here, and you found his house. And here is another puzzle. If I didn't skip the conversation before, someone will say that there's a family living in the forest. However, you don't see anything beside this little boy. So the reason that there's no house in this forest is because there's actually two forests. And the little boy said, there's only one forest. So you have to combine the forests together. And you will see a house. This is how the game works basically, and based on this idea, we take some experiment, and there's other things we'd like to show you. So, for example, if sometimes the tile could be hidden, so you have to make the word in a certain shape to find out tile, like this one. Or sometimes you only have 2 tiles, and in order to find a way out, you have to look carefully and try to find the correct way to follow the path. For example, you see a symbol here, and you walk to here, and you continue doing so, you can solve the puzzle. Or sometimes you are in the maze, and you can the maze that construct by yourself. Or the tile is more than one layer. So for example, this is the ground level. This is underground level. But you cannot change the map on underground level. You can change only on the ground level. So we'll change to the ground level, and the underground level change as well. Or for example, tiles are connected, that they move and rotate together like Tetris bricks. Or it's in-house, and there's nothing outside, and then there's in-house map. And that's our game, Carto. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to bring your game here. It's so charming, isn't it? It's just so beautiful. I'm sorry that we had the audio. We had a little bit of audio problem with that one earlier today, but we wanted to hot mic it. So we've been trying to work out all the kinks of experimental gameplay workshop for a while, but it's not really an experimental gameplay workshop unless someone's demo totally crashes or one of us trips down the stairs and breaks a leg. So, you know, losing a little bit of sound's not so bad. And so next we're going to have my favorite current game, Sloppy Forgeries.
Hello, I'm Jonah Warren, creator of the Sloppy Forgeries video game. Sloppy Forgeries is a fast-paced, two-player, competitive local multiplayer painting game. At the start of each round, players select an abstracted painting from art history whose color palette has been reduced to 4 to 5 colors. Each player, armed with a mouse, a blank canvas, and a few simple paint tools, has a minute and a half to copy the painting as quickly and as accurately as possible. Players can strategically use 3 seconds of a hint, briefly superimposing the goal painting over their canvas. As the forgeries are created, players are given immediate feedback on the accuracy of their reproductions. Accuracy is calculated by comparing each pixel of the original with the forgery and counting the number of matching colors, generating a percentage complete score. After a minute and a half of artful, painstaking decision-making, the painting with the highest percentage complete score wins. The game collects all the paintings generated, which you can do some fun things with, like finding the average or finding the mean. I also created an editor to help me reduce the color palette of a painting while keeping its distinguishing characteristics. An online multiplayer version of Sloppy Forgeries is currently being developed for iOS. It is planned to be released in the summer of 2019. Sign up for a newsletter at playfulsystems.com/sloppy or follow @playfulsystems and @sloppyforgeries on Twitter for release info.
I'm Gerben, or if you want to throw to hate you, Gerben. There you go. So let me boot up Eloquence real quick. This is the first time I get to show it to the world, basically, so I'm very excited about your responses. Now let's get immersed. Go. Saved it. So this is Eloquence, which is basically a point-and-click adventure game, only it uses a simple language that I designed. What you just heard is an alien crashing off the shore of a volcanic island with 3 peoples living on it with 3 different languages and 3 different cultures. You're the alien down here in human form, because it doesn't want to scare them, and it wants to prevent the volcano from erupting. So the way the game works is you walk up to a person, they will speak in a symbolic language, and what this alien can do is drag that language down to its inventory. So now it has it memorized, and then you can return it to an NPC to create a new input. So that allows you to walk on and talk to the other NPCs in this scene. You want to make it to the top as quickly as you can, so you try to identify an exit, which is probably here, right? So you can't quite make out what this guy wants, but probably has something to do with an apple, right? Who has apples? This one over here. Can anyone tell me what she's saying? This is like a regular sentence in English. Go again, you? Who trades fish for apples? So what would she say? Anyone else? Yeah, you, right. You win a stroopwafel. There you go. All right, so who has fish? This guy down here, right? So you can take this line, and I'm going to show you, I'm not going to spoil it to you, but just want to show you the mechanics and see you can create some different stuff. So if we look at this line right here, we have no idea what this means because we don't have any reference point for that. But maybe we can figure out what this means. What does this part mean? What do you think? Call it out. Go again? Yeah. You give me what? You get a stroopwafel. Right, so we move back down here. Give me a fish. He says, I will give you a fish. Walk back up there. I give you a fish. I give you an apple. What do we do with the apple? To the guard, well done. You all get a stroopwafel. And then he tells me to walk on. So that allows me to move to the next scene. This is a bit further in the game. This is way up at the volcano. And when we get here, you get some more complicated problems, basically. So we're not sure what this guy wants. This guy says hello again. And you may have noticed I've got some more extra tools on this side. So I am actually able to cut up the line right now and paste it back together. So I can make custom answers to solve the problems I need like that. So I'm going to jump out of the game and show you a bit more about the thought behind it. So there we go. Language is hot, right? It's sexy, it's happening, everyone likes language. We all use Duolingo. Some of us learn Japanese just to follow the anime in their original languages. We have blockbuster games coming out on language. We have games that give us symbol languages already, and more recently, Heaven's Fault, who actually won UK's Game of the Show award 2 days ago, so well done for them. So I thought this game has been in development. The language has been in development for 3 years. I've been testing it a lot for 3 years, and I thought this is time to show it to the world, basically. But where I think my game differs from most of the other games is it's less about finding out what the symbol actually means, and it's more about finding out how people use it in their conversations. So it's less about puzzling, and it's more about exploration, experimenting, seeing what happens. And it makes sense because language in itself is meaningless. It's all about the context. So if you have a look at this sentence, for example, this is Mandarin Chinese. This is Ni hao ma, meaning, are you okay? Are you well? How are you? But people rarely use this for this meaning in China. They instead say, 你吃了吗? Have you eaten? Did you eat yet? So food is very important in their culture, and that's where the meaning is derived from, not from the words themselves. So what I want you to do in this game is think like a linguist. And to give you a little example of that, this is a phrase from Irish. Now, to most of us, this is incomprehensible. But what a linguist does is see if he can assign some kind of meaning to every piece of that. So some of it is just translation, some of it is the meaning in context, and then you can translate that to something you do recognize, in this case, English. My game gives you a language that basically gives you the code for all other languages. I'm not interested in I'm not interested in the bottom part. That's up to you. So you can approach this from Italian or English or Mandarin Chinese or Portuguese. So that works both ways. Then you can use this language to communicate with anyone from all over the world. And I think that makes it very exciting. So I'm not sure how much time I have. Just want to show you how the world looks. So this is basically the game right here. Those are the levels. Each of them gives you a little bit of a lesson in the language itself. And it wraps around very nicely, so you can make your way to the top like that, or go straight up like there. Now each of the colors is actually a different symbol language, which uses the same symbols, but changes the syntax, which makes it easier for some of us to connect with it. So this should ensure that all of us have a language that clicks with them, and that allows you to get to the top of the volcano in time to save the island. A little bit more theoretical stuff about how we deal with language, so you have to know stuff first before you can create, and you can see that this overlaps perfectly with my design. So I'm easing you into the language, easing you into the game, and at the end you get to climb to the top. Big shout out to my team who helped me make this prototype. We're all part of a Dutch collective in the Game Bakery in the north. The guy on the left who's made the artwork on Insomniac Spider-Man as well, so kudos to him. And I need your help because I want funding, but most of all, I want a community. So I want to give you the demo. Be in touch with me through either of these channels, and I will send it to you in due time. Thank you so much for giving me time to present for you.
Video ready? Yeah. Great. It's such an interesting. So who won a stroopwafel? If you want a stroopwafel, please come and get one. They're amazing. If you don't come and take them, I'm going to eat them. So next up, we have another video, and this game is called Nerve Damage, and the person that's speaking to you is Dennis Carr.
My name is Dennis Carr, and this is my game, Nerve Damage. So before I get started, I just want to emphasize what it says on the screen here. This game has bright, rapidly flashing colors. There's a very, very strong seizure warning, and I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that before I start the game, which I'm going to do right now. Okay, so yeah, this is Nerve Damage. As you can hopefully see, it's a fast-paced, score-attack, arcade-style first-person shooter with a loud, noisy, experimental visual style. Yeah, and so when I started working on this game, I was coming off another project, Circle Zero, which is actually here, nominated for Nuovo Award in the IGF. Come see it. Just wanted to get that self-plug in there, of course. But, you know, at least at the time that I'd finished that game, I felt like, you know, I was very proud of it, and I put a lot into it. But it felt like maybe we'd created something that was a little bit too unfriendly to the player. It seemed like people were just bouncing off it, and not a lot of people were really engaging with it. So I was a little bit disillusioned, and I wanted to create a game that still felt meaningfully experimental, but which, you know, I wanted something that the players would be, you know, more likely to want to play, and that was maybe like fun, you know. And so, you know, I was also interested in this visual style that I'd been experimenting with, and how would a visual style that is maybe kind of antagonistic and difficult for the player to read would affect the way that the players engage with the game, you know, because it's a 3D game, and, you know, sort of in most 3D games, the idea is to make it as easy as possible for the player to immerse themselves in the environment. But, I wanted to bring some friction to that process and complicate it, make players aware of the effort they're expending to do that. And so I tried to sort of build up the screen so that it functions as much as a barrier into this world as it is a window. And, I want players to have to sort of push their way through it and learn to read it. And one thing I realized while I was making the game is that it is a little bit hard to immerse yourself in this world, but once you get over that hump, once you cross the barrier sort of functions as much to hold you into the game as it did to keep you out of it. So there's a little bit of a trance-like aspect to playing this game. It's hard to stop sometimes, and I like that. I think of it as being similar to the idea of the flow state, but where the flow state is based in this idea of serenity, I think the flow state that this game creates is more based in anxiety and adrenaline, and I find it kind of cathartic to play a game like that. I like it. I like media that challenges you as much as it caters to you, and I like the idea that video games are a space where themes like anxiety, compulsion, pain, discomfort can coexist with an experience that's kind of fun to play also and genuinely entertaining. And so that's kind of the experience that I'm creating with Nerve Damage. And yeah, thank you for watching the video and enjoy the rest of the UGW.
So this game is actually a really great opportunity to sort of have a teachable moment. So we've had a couple games in the showcase over the years that were like this. How many of you were here to see Jonathan Blow demoing some of the hardest levels of Space Giraffe years ago? Yeah, right. So that was a really intense game that used what we call obfuscation to create a sense of panic and also a flow state. And then there was another game that was demoed here. How many of you remember there was this guy that made a list of the games that he would make if he had time on the internet, and then people started making the games and he got really mad that they stole his ideas? So like one year, Sean Barrett for one of the game jams made a game called Lost in the Static. How many of you saw that game? Yeah, so it was basically a screen that was all static, and the only time you could navigate, the way they navigated was by basically rotating in the static to see where the static didn't change. And then when you think about it, kind of like Unfinished Swan might be something that comes in that same pattern, right? And now there's a bunch of glitch games as well. My students have made several, most of them incredibly unplayable, but nevertheless interesting as a flow state case in this sort of Scribble Knight kind of like way. And like if you're scribbling and like everything's spastic and you get into a flow state, that's a really interesting place to explore in games. And I really like this particular video because it sort of gives us, it holds space for a game that's about the infinite rage that we all feel right now, all the time. So having said that, Plus Minus is here. I'll let them introduce themselves.
So hi everyone, I'm Juuso. This is Antti. We're from Aalto University, Finland, so that's quite far away. But we're here to show you Plus Minus. So we're two of the developers. It was a team of 6. Now this game is pretty conventional. So you can run around, you can jump, you can move third-person camera. It's an action game. But there's this addition we put in here, and that's magnetism. So you can actually magnetize any metal object in the surroundings, either positively or negatively. And now opposite polarities, they attract each other, and negative polarities repel. And you might notice these bubbles around the magnetized objects, and those are there to demonstrate what the effective range is of the magnets. So as soon as 2 bubbles start overlapping, there starts to be an interaction. And the closer they get, the stronger that interaction. Now, you can only magnetize metal objects, but there's a lot of surface here that's not metallic. You can still use that. So you can actually shoot the walls or the floor, and it'll create this temporary field. And this is useful for a variety of things, like moving objects around. So those are the basics. Let's get on to the gameplay. So what can we actually do with this magnetic system? And a lot of the game is about moving through levels. So there's rarely a direct path you can take. Instead, you need to look at what's in the environment and how can you move that into a position that's going to let you get through. And we're really playing around with a lot of like these tropes that are in action games. So we have combat as well, but we're doing something a bit different with that. So usually you would shoot enemies to kill them, Here, if you shoot an enemy, it's only going to polarize it. It's not actually going to cause any direct damage. However, collisions cause damage. So magnetism is actually perfect for that kind of combat. You're kind of bullying the enemies here. So here we drop down and there's these 3 robots. Again, you can do the same thing. You can make the robots collide into each other and they're going to start taking damage. You can make them smash into walls. That's going to do the same thing. Or you can look around what's in the environment. So we have these endless pits. Mario usually falls into them. But you can drop the robots down into there. So really encouraging players to come up with these creative solutions for approaching problems such as combat. And just like the enemies, the player actually takes collision damage as well. So usually what ends up happening is you're playing around with magnets and then you get like this really large magnet in your face. Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen, but let's kind of hope that it does. Okay, so that was combat. Now we're going to move on to some sections that are more focused on platforming. So that's, again, another trope from action games. You got this platforming, but we want to do it a bit differently. So right now, here you have this large metal block, and it's in the way. And it might look like it's really heavy, but the magnetic system doesn't really care about that. So you can just move it out the way. Then we get to this pit. You need to get across. But there aren't really any platforms right there. However, there are these discs at the bottom, and you can just magnetize those, lift them up, and you've created a path for yourself. At this section, it's pretty standard. We're still tutorializing the system. But later on, it starts to really open up, and you don't have these obvious solutions. Those enemies, they have the weirdest AI. They just sometimes jump down on top of you. And okay, so we're taking a pretty standard approach through this level. Yeah, there's a lot of potential for taking these creative shortcuts, and we'll get back to that later. And you may have noticed we have these mechanisms like elevators and doors in our game. You'll find them in every game, but we're also using magnetism for those. And that's kind of important for the player so that we can really teach them to get used to this magnetism. And it also kind of creates this cohesion where everything in the world works with this same core magnetic system. Now this room is pretty fun. So we have this floor that can be magnetized, but we also have a ceiling that can be magnetized. And the effect is pretty surprising. So what's happening here is we got the floor pushing the enemies up, the ceiling pushing the enemies down, and they end up in this kind of limbo where they're just bouncing around. And it's kind of silly, but it's a lot of fun. And you can probably imagine how this might be used in puzzles or other level elements. Okay, now we defeated those. We're going to skip forward a bit. We don't have a lot of time, and this is a pretty cool level we're going to show you. Now, the thing in this level is we have this giant metal pillar in the center. And as you magnetize it, it creates a magnetic field that covers the entire area. So this creates this sort of dynamic where now if you magnetize anything in the room, it's going to get either pushed or pulled towards the center. Now, it's another platforming stage, so you need to get kind of creative how you move forward. So here we have this large gap. There's no platforms there, so you need to look, what have we got here? And we got these boxes. So you can attach a box to the pillar, and all of a sudden you have a platform. Now you could take the same approach for the rest of the level, so creating these platforms for yourself. But we promised a shortcut, so we're going to try to do that. Now it's a bit tricky to set up, and we didn't actually design this shortcut, so a playtester was actually able to find it. But it was really cool, and we really want to keep these sort of cool elements in our game. So if the player finds a way to break our game, we let them. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're building a sort of launcher. We got two magnets on top of each other. And there we go. We just skipped like half the level. So yeah, this is plus minus. We're going to upload a small demo of this soon after GDC so that anybody else can go try it out and have some fun with it. So make sure to check that out. Thanks.
So plus minus another opportunity for us to do a little Wayback Machine with the experimental gameplay workshop audience. How many of you were here when the original Portal first demoed for the first time ever here in the session? That's right. So games like Portal, you know, at the time that they were being made, were considered so experimental that they submitted to the workshop. So that's how much has changed over the course of the history of the workshop. And I also just wanted to take the moment here to say a little bit about dynamic games. So what I love about Plus Minus and games like Portal and the kinds of games that that I've always loved to play is that they have systems in them, and they spend a lot less time on fidelity and a lot more time on simulating specific systems with a kind of fidelity that is just enough to create those kinds of opportunistic learnings for players. And that's actually how people learn, and it's why play is learning. And so it's really, really awesome to get games like this submitted. It used to be that Experimental Gameplay Workshop was almost only physics games. And we've really been able to branch out and show games that are sometimes a little bit more like a paper game. Sometimes they're literally edible. Sometimes they're physical. They're based on computing systems that are emerging. And sometimes they're systems based in ways that we have never perceived, or play with your vision and your ears. We've had all audio games here that you play in a gas mask. How many of you saw that? All right, see, so we're starting to get to the place now where Experimental Gameplay Workshop kind of defies description because it's whatever you submit. And I really want to keep encouraging you to into designing and presenting, even if it's a bizarre thing that you think may not be fun, to bring it to us. If you're watching on the internet and you have a bizarre experiment, you've never been to GDC, you don't even have to come here anymore. You can just send us the game, we'll put a video up, and maybe somebody will mail you a check and you'll be able to make it in your own home and never leave. You'll be able to live your life in your pajamas, smoking weed and making your favorite game. So that sounds like the life of a true artist to me. And so with that, I'm going to let Sean Liu talk about hostile user interface.
Sean Liu. This is Hostile User Interface, a game I worked on at the School of IGM at RIT. The object of the game is to navigate the maze, but the controls have been intentionally designed to trick the player into accidentally triggering Windows hotkey combinations. The inspiration came from my professor, Ian Schreiber's daughter, who crawled over his keyboard when she was 1 year old, causing the screen to flip upside down. And he had to use Google with an upside down screen to figure out what she did and how to undo it. Thus, the idea to create a game where the challenge doesn't come from the game, but from the actual operating system. He pitched this as one of the many ideas to work on in a class on experimental gameplay, and I decided I wanted to explore this concept. So, this first thing you have to do to start is hold down the keys Control, Alt, and Delete. Obviously, if you hit these keys the way normal people do, it brings up the security menu. If you wait long enough, the game gives you a hint. Pressing delete first, because pressing Control or Alt afterwards won't trigger the normal Windows response. From the high concept, the immediate problem is that it sounds more like a practical joke than a fun game. So where do you start? I could have made QWOP using the Control, Alt, F4, and Escape keys, but I doubt players would find it very fun. Instead, I started with a simple game and thought about what would best enable hotkeys. Some keys need to be held down while other keys are pressed to trigger hotkeys, like holding down F4 and pressing Alt does nothing. So I had the idea of having death fields and doors, one of which requires players to hold buttons down and the other that requires single key presses. The other theme throughout development is that when the player does something wrong, they have to blame themselves and not the UI, even though it's totally the UI's fault. That's how to make the player feel like they're overcoming a challenge and not that they're just getting laughed at by the game. I found there are a few ways to do this. One wants to make an experience enough of a clear game that the player can become immersed in the play. As soon as the player enters a flow state, they'll start playing on automatic. They're hitting keys without thinking, accidentally closing the app, and then realize what they did and that it happened because they weren't paying attention, which gives us the self-blame that we're looking for. Once I had the basics of the game working, the rest came down to designing levels and traps in different and unique ways to keep the game interesting. Skipping ahead, this is a first-person game where we give players the option to close the game. Previously, combinations of hotkeys have had minimal effect. Despite giving them all the warnings, most players will still manage to close out the game on this screen. This isn't an obvious trap. Players have to go out of their way just to do this. If they proceed normally, then nothing happens. This happens both if I'm standing there giving them warnings and in blind tests where I'm not even in the room. It's also around here where three different types of players emerge. Some players love the game and want to keep playing, some players hate the game but want to watch other people suffer through it, and the last group hates the game but has to keep playing until they beat it because it's a matter of pride at that point. Some struggles with making this game were that not all hardware is the same. Laptop keyboards aren't standardized at all with the layout of their home, end, delete, and page down buttons, but this is an extremely niche problem as controls for most games don't use these keys. On the software side, certain programs have their own hotkeys that can interfere with gameplay, such as the newest hotkey combination NVIDIA's GeForce Experience added to take screenshots. At the moment, there isn't really any way to fix it besides just disabling these hotkeys. For those interested in either playing Hostile User Interface or sending it to their friends and or enemies, it's currently available on Steam.
Hostile user interface proves the fact that the platform holder always has the power. Yeah, so making an experimental game can happen when you're a student. It can happen with just the hotkeys on your computer. So you have no excuse if you have the desire to make experimental games. And next up, we have Tim here to talk about what the golf?
Yeah, I need power. Okay, it works. It works. Okay, this is the experimental gameplay workshop, so I hope it works. Please, please. Shit. Yes. Okay, can I get audio? Oh no, it's the wrong audio. What? I kind of need audio for some of it. While
we're doing this, I'd just like to take a moment.
Nothing.
All the audio engineers that work the room at EGW every year, because this happens every year. The AV staff for the EGW is always amazing. Let's have a huge round of applause for the people that made us see and hear this stuff today.
I'm working on this game called What the Golf, and it's not just me. The rest of the team is just actually working on the game and not hanging out here. So a lot more thanks to them. 2 years ago, I presented a game here called Keyboard Sports, Saving QWERTY. And that also used all the keys on the keyboard, and we also had the Alt F4 problem. And we haven't released it yet, still in some trouble, but working hard on it. Let's do this. We started out making an actual golf game, kind of Dark Souls inspired golf, called Dark Holes. It did not work. It wasn't that funny. It turns out golf just isn't that funny. It's kind of boring. So we kind of moved on from there, and you can go a little bit up on the volume. Can I do that? Yeah, okay. We moved on from that and tried a few other things. And we have actually just kept making golf games ever since. So we made like 500 golf games. And most of them are really bad. These are some of the better ones. Let's play back to normal ordinary golf. So the first thing we kind of started exploring after it failed with the first project and second project. We were like, we can play with scale, and we can like, obviously it doesn't need to be a golf ball. And you can add a few puns and then it kind of works. And then you're kind of out of inspiration again, and you just look around the office. What can we make? And then you kind of use a bunch of different objects, and it's like, that's obvious. We can do boxes and triangles and things, but we can also do things to the flag. And once you kind of know golf is about getting a thing from A to B, you can kind of swap those things. So now I'm the hole, and I'm kind of going into this one here. You can kind of see what's coming. It's a hole. And then once we have like the golf, everything nailed, you can like think there are other games about getting a ball from A to B, like this one. It's like, and then you can always go for like a quick fun thing where it just. But now we nailed A from A to B, but why not change the perspective? There's no reason it's not first-person golf, right? And once we're in first person, we can also just go back to normal 2D golf. This is kind of like desert golf, but it's actually really boring. It's one of the ones that didn't really make it. But then we were like, fuck that, let's do something else. Then once we're in 2D, why not look at some other 2D games? They're all kind of golf games. And at this point, we're like, maybe all games are kind of golf games. And then we can zoom out and relax a little bit. Ooh. And then, like, again, golf, getting things from A to B. You can probably find few other games out there. And then that never really gets old. And then we can kind of just go back to like the old thing here, because now everyone knows exactly what's gonna happen when I do this. And another rule in golf is you usually don't hit the ball while it's still moving, but what if we just remove that? And then we just started looking at everything. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Can I? Yeah, they probably wanna.
Super secret
No.
thing. Do it. Do it.
No. This is a bit awkward. It doesn't do anything. Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool.
And I believe for this next video, Trin, you're here, right? You're here? Yes, okay, yeah. So Trin is here. This is Trin's video, and it is called You Busy?
Hey everyone, I'm Trin, and I'm the game designer behind You Busy. You Busy is a game about the various channels that people and information need to flow through in order to complete work. Essentially, it's a game about productivity when there are a million things that conflict for our attention any given day at the office. Whether it be getting an approval on a task, attending a meeting, having to put out a fire, there are so many things that get in the way of us being able to check that box off of the list. So as a mix of a game designer, business analyst, project manager, I was like, what a fascinating system to work with. You know, so much communication is required for us to actually feel productive at work. What if I put this into a hectic local multiplayer environment just to see how that sheds light on the system? So I very literally ripped approval processes from previous jobs I've had, and I put them into the game and added meetings, added fires, added all the fun stuff at the office to try to make it actually fun, but also to shed light on the system and to really show like how much it takes for us to feel productive under the current circumstances.
There you go. I have a task just like chilling over here in the abyss. Hey, Green, thank you. Oh wait, I didn't get you. Oh, because of the meeting. Here, there you go.
You still got it. I think get approved.
I was pressing it. Green? We're here. I can approve you.
Yeah.
There you go. Got you. Thank you. Alright. I need to go to. Oh, I think pink. I need you.
Green, come here.
Thank you.
Oh. So I made this game with one other person, my partner in crime and fabulous programmer, Chris Sosa. However, we currently are not working on the game. This was just like a super short project for us, really quick dev cycle, something we just wanted to get out of our systems. But there are like a million things that we want to do with it. Like right now, since it's a vertical slice, you start right in the middle. It's like starting closer to the fish and chips level of Overcooked, which is just a lot. But we have a list of changes and improvements, changing the sounds, changing the levels, ramping up gameplay, that sort of thing. We just currently don't have the time or the funds to work on it. So we're really just enjoying showing it at festivals and hearing what people have to say about it, hearing about their work experiences. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can contact us at my Twitter handle, I am Trin, and I'd love to hear about your work experience, what really resonated with you in the game, if you're interested in working on it eventually, if we ever started up, like in general, we would just love to hear from you.
So yeah, Trin is here. So if you wanted to, make her dream come true of making a game about the stress of being in an office, you could just come up here at the end of the session and give her a fat check. Maybe you could give us both fat checks, and then everybody would win. I think that one of the things about EGW is that it does allow us to talk about things that can be, but also, I think as Trin pointed out, things that are, and like it's not easy being us all the time, making the stuff that we make. And this place hopefully is giving you some inspiration. We're getting a little close to the end of the session this year because we decided to keep it a little shorter because the EGW used to be a marathon of endless games and everyone had to take a pee break in the middle and it was kind of intense. And this year we're just kind of trying to keep it a little bit more focused. So we really appreciate your focus this year and this format. I would personally like your feedback. If you want to see more games, if you want the session to get bigger again, if you want more stuff up front at the end, let me know. I know there are no donuts this year. Maybe there'll be donuts next year. And with that, we're going to have Frank here talk about picture processing.
Hi, I'm Frank DeMarco from New York, and I'm making a game called Picture Processing. It's a picture puzzle where the object is to fix a glitch on your screen by swapping the graphics with each other. The original demo was created for a game jam called A Game by Its Cover, an online jam where games are created based on imagined NES games, submitted to another separate annual event, a gallery exhibit called My Famicase. My Famicase is an awesome art show that has been held yearly in Japan since 2005. In that slide, you can see there are a bunch of fake NES cartridges. The game that I chose to make my game based on is called Sado by Ishii Hiroaki. The glitched out cover was very inspiring and looked cool to me. And I checked the description by doing a Google Translate. And it seems like the game concept is it's a conceptual game where you put a cartridge in. it's not working, and you meditate on the beauty of imperfection in the glitched out screen. I added one thing to that concept, which is you meditate so hard, you can telepathically access the graphics memory of the system and fix the glitch by swapping graphics with each other. Let's start a new game and take a look at the introduction. So you're in your living room, you try to play a game, you put the cartridge in the system, it's glitched out, and so you start meditating, and you get superpowers. You're intimately engaging with the hardware of your video game console. As the great Bob of Bob's Game put it, it's a game inside of a game. This is what the final illustration in the introduction looks like. It's a head attached to a Nintendo by an energy beam. And it's pretty weird, but it's one of my ultimate fantasies, using a mind control beam with a Nintendo. So let's play scene 1. The only hint the player gets is this title, so for scene 1 your hint is power up. When the scene begins, you're presented with a pretty severe mess of graphics. Also, sometimes it's a little subtle, but the sound is glitched out too. So if you listen, you can hear the music is booping every second or so. So if the player knows it's a puzzle and they caught the basic idea of the game, they might be able to put together that this level is a side-scroller based on the hint, and seeing there's a mushroom and there's a Mario-looking character, maybe the clouds and the ground might tell you something. But maybe they can't tell anything. Somebody yesterday told me that the Mario tile looks like a hamburger. And maybe they didn't catch the premise of the game, but I'll talk about that in a second. So there's only one interaction at this point. Let's try pressing enter. This menu comes up where all the tiles are displayed, and you're able to choose between them. The numbers on the left correspond to memory addresses. Every one of these tiles is in the wrong memory address, because the game makes sure all the tiles are shuffled out of their correct locations. If you select one of the tiles and then select another, you'll notice the screen changes somewhere from slightly to a lot. So you can see the top is mostly filled with clouds, which is pretty good because that's supposed to be the sky. And the bottom is dirt, which is also pretty good, but they're both in the wrong place. So let's try swapping cloud and ground. So you could see that every place where the ground was, now there's clouds, and every place where the clouds were, now there's ground. But if you do a small swap, like the blank space and the mushroom, you might not notice much changes on the screen. I've noticed that the real aha moment for this level is when you put the sky in the right place. So let's switch memory 6 with memory 0. So now it kind of looks a little bit more like a side scroller. Then it just becomes a classic puzzle game situation where you're putting things in the right place, satisfying that compulsion that basically governs everything, what we're all out here exploiting for profit. Mario goes here. Tree goes here. Rock goes there. And ground goes there. Oh, but what's this? It looks correct, but we're still one swap away. If you look at the bottom of the screen, it tells you how many swaps you have left. I think one of the things that makes this game unique is you're solving a puzzle that only has an objective answer based on how the designer arranges the scene. In most puzzle games, there are no arbitrary situations. There are rules in the game that prevent them. In Picross, the numbers that guide the player are generated directly by the pixels on the grid. In Tetris, if you don't put the lines into the right order, you lose. In this game, if the level designer decided the sky was made of rock, they could do that. Sometimes people play this game by arranging the tiles to look like something they want to see, and they have fun with it that way. In this scene, it turns out that I think it looks slightly better if Mario is to the left of the mushroom. And so so the sound unglitches, and you've beaten level 1. So yeah, this is level 2. It's supposed to be a driving level. It's like a race car level. But because I've noticed a lot of people want to be creative while playing, I've started working on a level editor. So let's take a look at that. So yeah, there's 3 different things you can do from the main menu of the level editor. You can edit the tiles, you can test the level that you're building, or you can place the tiles on the level. So let's start by making a tile. So I'll start by clearing the default title. So yeah, there's a paint tool, and I'm just going to clear the whole tile to white. And now I'll select green, and I'm going to try to draw a plant. Yeah, you can see in the background that the whole level is changing. And that's just because the whole level is set to be the first tile. So yeah, that kind of looks like a plant. And you can also load tiles. So I'm going to put these numbers in. Okay, and now I'm going to place those. Yeah. Okay, let's test the level. All right, so it's all scrambled up. Usually the free swap is the background, so you can see it's all filled with 2s. So we'll just put the plant there. And now let's see if we can crack this code. Yeah, and that's it. So in the level editor, it just says solved in the bottom when you solve the level. So a quick note about some attention this game received. A blog by someone who has a PhD wrote about picture processing. Not supposed to laugh yet. Probably a lot of people here have a PhD, and that's no big deal. But I don't have one. I have a computer science degree that's not even a science degree. It's a Bachelor of Arts. But I guess that's appropriate, though. This is art, right?
Video Ball, which is available now for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Steam for PC. Video Ball.
It's still available, Video Ball.
For PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Steam for PC.
So anyway, a blog that is a PhD blog wrote about my game, so I guess my game is pretty cool. Please check out my PayPal.
All right, so this is going to be the last presentation for the day. And Eddie and I are just going to stay up here and we'll watch with you. We wanted to make a note here because this video was submitted by someone who just shipped their game, which is a huge accomplishment. So for the tape, let's give them a huge round of applause. Jay's been pretty stressed out because he just shipped his game. So the first part of the video is just going to be Jay for 3 minutes talking about his game. So here's Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay Tholen, the lead developer of Hypnospace Outlaw. Hypnospace Outlaw started in 2014 as a small micro game called Hypnospace Enforcer. And that's where the whole concept of using the internet while you sleep started, using headbands at night. It was a little bit more futuristic then. And while there was an operating system part, it wasn't as robust. The main part of the game was this sort of a play on the information superhighway, and it was an side-scrolling endless runner. And you played as a cop, and you had to apprehend people for doing these various pretty banal internet violation things. So it came from that, and then it evolved into more of an operating system game over time because people just responded better to the operating system parts. So yeah, I started making a sequel shortly after releasing that in late 2014 or early 2015, around when my work on Dropsy was ending. Anyway, and then from that point on until the Kickstarter in 2016, and even a year after that, it became more of just a big fake internet. Me and my programmer Mike made a few tools, a page builder, and a custom HSP Hypnospace page format for pages, and a tune sequencer. And the game runs the songs from the tune sequencer at runtime. It triggers all the samples and the effects and everything. So we did have a little bit of a framework for a game in there, like where you make progress, but it was mostly just a big internet that we were making, and I was, intent on making it a game eventually, but I wasn't just very interested in that. So then, about a year and 2 or 3 months ago, then we kind of were like, okay, we have to make it into a game. Like, if you want to, if it was just, up to me and I wasn't, if I didn't need money, then I would have just maybe kept going and making a big internet, but I felt like we needed like progression systems. Well, that wasn't too bad. They didn't really change a whole lot about the big, deep web that you get to explore. Anyway, so yeah, that's the basics, and what I'll be doing is...
Not bad. You want to watch it again? Yeah, here's the trailer again. Watch it again.
Professor Helper here, ready to help.
Important message received.
So this room has the capacity to hold maybe 1,000 people. It's pretty close to capacity. So if you each gave him $1,000, that'd be rad. If everyone that watched this trailer on the internet gave him $1,000 for his game, that'd be even more rad. And he could probably live for a long time just making games, doing this thing. Everyone's had that moment where they're working on something and they go, oh, I should probably put a progression system in here. I think that moment in the video is the one that really struck me. It was like, oh yeah, no, you probably have to. But you don't always have to. And as we continue to create spaces like this in our communities where people can show their art, you don't have to. You can support each other, not just with money, but also with congratulations, love, hugs, donuts. So if you have a moment at some point to just send this guy an email, look his game up, drop him a line and say, hey, I love that demo. Thanks for making your weird internet somewhat playable. That would be really nice. That'd be a nice thing for you to do. I'm not saying you have to do it, but one of the ways that we thrive is by getting positive feedback, and that would be really nice. And so everybody that participated, if you showed a video, if you're a game developer that's here that was in the showcase, please come up, as well as all the organizers, please come up on stage. This is experimental gameplay. And you are all experimental gameplay. And GDC is now actually almost officially over. We have 15 minutes. Instead of having question session, just come up and meet these people and give them a hug. Thank you.